All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I am your host, Damon Pistolka, and I am so excited for our guest today because we've got none other than Tobey Wyatt from Motherlode Consulting, and we will be talking today about the quantifiable impact of a CEO's trusted advisor. Tobey, welcome.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here again.
Yes. It's awesome having you here because love talking about the topic today, because CEOs, people that aren't in it, as founder, CEO, don't really understand that position, what that really is like, and the importance and the value of the trusted advisors around them.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing which advisors you need at any given time. Yeah.
Great point. So when we talk about this and we talk about this CEO's trusted advisor, what do you think are some of the hallmark characteristics that really are the cornerstone of being that trusted advisor for the CEO?
So what makes a good trusted advisor?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's an interesting question because there's so many different answers to that. I can tell you why I think I make a good one, but certainly it's somebody who has breadth and experience in a space that a CEO needs, right? That's a super broad example. But if you're trying to fundraise, if you're a pre-seed company and you know that you're going down that route, you're going to need a trusted advisor that knows what that route's like and knows how to talk to people and knows maybe what connections that you should be making or where to make those connections. And so that would be an incredible trusted advisor for that frameway of experience. There's trusted advisors that are very product based or go to market based. And so these are not the people who live inside your company. These are not your go to market specialists that live inside your company, but they are the ones who can have those high level conversations with a CEO. So I think there's the subject matter expertise, which is I'm sort of getting at, and it can be broad, right? Different people have different things, and different CEOs need different access to different advising in different capacities. But what you need to be able to do is not only speak the language of whatever that expertise is that you're bringing, so the go-to-market approach or the fundraising or the operations that I bring, you need to be able to speak CEO language, right? Which can be different because a lot of these CEOs are innovators. They are not operations-based people. And so you need to understand when they say something, what they're really kind of meaning behind it so that you're answering 3 questions deeper than what they think they're asking. Because if you, as a CEO, only get the answer you ask for, you're probably not getting so much more that you just didn't even think to ask.
That's a great point. It's a great point because they're asking a question and probably don't know the deeper questions that need to be answered as well.
Right. And we all struggle with that, right? I think there's no way that I've answered all the soul level questions of the CEO I work with or anything like that. But there is a translation that definitely happens on a regular basis. And if you don't understand the subtle meaning of what they mean by marketing spend or what they mean by, the people aren't communicating with each other. If you don't understand what typically is sort of underlying those things, then those advisors are going to be very straightforward, which oftentimes that's what makes an advisor a little bit different than the best person you can have in-house to execute on the work. You don't necessarily need your executor to be a great translator, but you do need your advisor to be able to speak both languages.
Yeah. And that's a great point because an advisor really is more of a person that you discuss strategy with. You discuss ideation on, what should we do in this situation? What are our options, more than you would with somebody in the inside that is like, okay, we're going down this road, I need to execute. It's a lot different because that person inside may not have the experience or be comfortable with the ideation at a high level about which direction should we go or which, strategy should we implement.
Yeah. And a lot of what I've realized my work boils down to is providing what I call safe, judgment-free, productive places for CEOs to work through their challenges. And I think any advisor relationship really needs to be based on all three. And so really understanding what each three means, because you just identified a couple of the reasons why these are the words that I've chosen. So safe is an interesting one because for some people, certain conversations with a CEO aren't safe. Whether this is we have a difference of opinion and we need to hash it out, but you're the CEO and I'm not. And so what's the power dynamics at play here? Am I really giving my full opinion? Are we able to have tension in the room? Right. With an advisor, I'm not your employee. I don't have to
Yeah.
worry in the same way. So I'm free to have that. But the other direction is also true where sometimes the CEO doesn't feel like they wouldn't be safe to say something because maybe that'll get out to a broader group or maybe, so that safety piece isn't just purely psychological safety. Sometimes it's about role safety. Sometimes it's about task safety. I know that sounds very strange, but the idea is a lot of times a CEO will sit in a meeting and do their thing. They'll innovate, they'll ponder, and the executors in the room will hear marching orders. And then they'll go off and do stuff that they really weren't supposed to do because, they heard them sort of pontificate on something. So the safety is a big thing. Judgment free is just a very important subsection of that, especially in the operations work I do, because I'm talking about the interpersonal dynamics of a lot of teams. And so you start talking about, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm annoyed, I'm all these things. And I need to have bi-directional judgment free, which means I'm not judging the CEO for the fact that they're frustrated and angry and annoyed at somebody who, maybe they shouldn't be. And I'm also judgment free of the other person because I know I'm getting a one-way perspective. And so I can't start to formulate a negative opinion of the person they're talking about because that's probably not healthy either. So those are the two. And then productive is really interesting. I think most people feel like they can get safe and judgment free from external resources, friends, maybe external colleagues, their spouse, right? This is the people you're venting to on a regular basis. Problem with some of those ventings is they're not productive because those people don't have internal knowledge of really what's going on or best practices of what the best solution is. And so your best advisors quickly are able to get up to speed with a lot of context. And so they can give you productive answers that aren't just like pie in the sky from, an outside perspective that doesn't really connect with what's going on.
That's a great point because the people that you're venting to, if it's not like this trusted advisor, may not have the experience to even help you navigate through it.
Yeah.
And they
can provide bad advice.
Yeah, bad advice, and just let you, or I think another thing that trusted advisors really help with is to help people let it out, work through it and move on. Because, if you're telling that to somebody, you're venting to somebody that has no idea, they may just keep taking you down the rabbit hole with that thing. And really that as a CEO, every minute in the rabbit hole is a minute that you're not working on the business and moving forward faster. So that's a great point. I love what you brought up a moment ago, because I used to see this happen in meetings, having visionary leaders, right? You'd be in a group and then I was usually either working with the owners themselves, around them a lot like that, and running the businesses, or I was an outside party in these situations, and you would hear that same thing like you're saying. It's like, yeah, it would be really cool if we did this or something like that. And then people are walking out of the meeting and you go, they're making plans to do it. And you're like, no. She was just supposing that on a good day, maybe if we got everything aligned, that's what we would do. And you might want to go check that before we move on. And it saves a lot of time of having that perspective to really help give them a place, like you said, to run through those ideas in their mind, and then help them be aware of the fact that who they're speaking to, and that it's only so much that they really can talk to, because on the converse of this, you can cause a lot of anxiety in people, internal people, if you're proposing, well, maybe we should change our business philosophy and go this different direction. Right. And it's everybody's thinking, what's going to happen to me? What am I going to do? It's going to upend my life, my career, all this other things. And that trusted advisor can really allow you the time to, like you said, a safe space where they can pontificate on those ideas, work through them, and get them into a format that is more complete and more appropriate to share with everyone.
Yeah. And I think, some of what you're saying is you need to get the emotion out, right? It's important to vent, but you do have to have that stopping point of, okay, I've done the vent. Now it's time to turn it productive. And so you have to have the right people around you that actually can help you make that transition instead of just like, let's have a party in vent session mode, right? So yeah, knowing how to turn like that release valve into then the forward progress is important. And a lot of times what I do find is that my conversations end up being practice conversations for the internal conversations they need to have. So I don't replace internal talent. I can't have it. So having a meeting with me is not going to replace having a meeting with all of your engineers to brainstorm about what solution you're going to go. That's not me or any other trusted advisor. It really shouldn't be. But you're right that if you're still in CEO mode for that meeting, then either you're going to have people confused, you're going to have people tense, you're going to have people anxious, because they need sort of an operator in that mode. They need somebody who knows this is what I'm thinking. How do I gain feedback? It doesn't mean one directional, but sometimes these CEOs need to go, okay, now this is where you listen. This is what you're going to do once you've listened, right? Sometimes you really need that step-by-step guidance on how to run those meetings in the way that they need, not you as a CEO would naturally sort of run for.
Mm-hmm. So Tobey, what are the things that you like the most about being a trusted advisor to a CEO?
I mean, the wonderful thing is I get involved in conversations that run the gamut of a whole company without having to be in the day-to-day of the company the whole time. And so for me, that is such a spectacular seat to sit in. It wakes my brain up. I get to like all of these different flashes of all the different experience I've ever gained in my life all come together. And so what's really interesting is sometimes it feels like I'm just talking to people, right? It doesn't feel like I'm contributing, all that much. But the response I get tells me that that's not true. The response I get is, "Oh my gosh, this was so helpful. I never thought about it that way," and this is just the way my brain sort of works. And so it just feels really, really good to be in an environment where I can produce that much value in that little time. Just knowing the way I approach things and the experiences I've had in my past.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some of the things that from your past? I mean, you've had several chief of staff, COO type operational roles. What are some of the things you think that have really in those roles you learned that really has helped you to be this CEO trusted advisor?
I mean, I've learned such great things at so many different places. I would say some of the big value of my experience is that it's very differentiated. And that works for the kind of advising that I do, which is operations. But I've seen, Fortune 100, and I've seen bootstrapped startup, right? I've seen global organizations, and I've seen, 5-person teams or 2-person teams. And so that variety really allows me to pick and choose from all the different areas and sort of combine them in my own little way to come up with new approaches that work for a given situation without trying to reinvent the wheel either. Just knowing this is what I've seen work in certain contexts and knowing why it worked in that context and why it didn't. So always having that really challenging your environment viewpoint has given me the ability to sort of know that there's not one toolbox that works for every environment. And the converse of that is none of us are as special as we think we are, right? So there's the two tails of that, right? Nothing is all the same, and nothing is super as unique as we sort of want to think it is. And so the chief of staff work was really great. But even before that, a lot of what I did when I was younger um, really applies too. So I remember in school, I did peer mentorship. And so just that, how do you engage with people? How do you allow them to vent and do all of that? And so it's just a really, really broad set of experiences that um, I've had. I think my childhood and being disrupted so often and learning resilience, learning how to be adaptable, all of those things really help a CEO when they're trying to figure out a chaotic moment, or they're
Oh yeah.
trying to, if they're trying to survive in and knowing what that feels like and being able to be empathetic to that. I think that's all contributed to how it works.
Yeah. So when you're talking and in your work, how do you think having that trusted advisor allows the CEO to improve things like speed to decision?
Absolutely. So, as I said, a lot of times what happens is we can have practice discussions in the conversations I'm having with CEOs. And what this allows is for them to have really crystallized their thoughts much better. A lot of times they think their thoughts are clear, but I poke holes with all the questions I ask, and they
Oh yeah.
realize, oh, I hadn't thought about that angle, which then means that when they're in a discussion, they have already thought about that angle. So when there is a back and forth about what is the best decision we should make or what is it we should do, it's not about let me manipulate my opinion into be overpowering, but it is about I really truly sort of know the things I want to know about this. And now whatever input I'm going to get from others fits nicely into a container that's already created.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really about shaping those dynamics, removing the emotional element. And so that's why I say it's important to get those emotions out that any
Yeah.
CEO is experiencing, good or bad, and then going, okay, those those emotions are now a fact that we're going to consider among all the other facts, right? The fact that you are happy about this or the fact that you're angry about this, that can sit there as a fact in other contexts. But if you're making the decision from a vantage point of anger, that's now a filter rather than a piece of the puzzle. And so I think all of that, when you have a filter on, you're going to either make a lesser decision, which means you might have to come back and make the right decision later once you realize
Yeah.
that you failed at something. So that's certainly a speed element. Or you're just going to be slower because you're going to be confused by what's actually important when you're sort of sifting through an emotional vantage point.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, as the CEO and their trusted advisors work together, and the trusted advisor knows the person, knows the business a bit more, and even though they begin the trust continues to build over time, but as you build that and the advisor understands the business, understands the person more, they can help them with the right direction or the right suggestions to get to that end point faster.
Absolutely. It's one of the magical things that happens is I end up knowing the blind spots and the weaknesses and the, just areas that they struggle in the most. And so
Mm-hmm.
I can sort of see them when they're going to tell me, here's the situation I faced this week. I can sort of see it coming. Oh, okay. Yep. I see this angle on the things that we've worked about together. And sometimes it'll be funny because in some of these coaching sessions or advising sessions, I'll hear this a lot like, oh, I know what you're going to tell me. I'm like, I wonder if you do, because they think I'm just going to repeat the same advice. But when you get to know somebody, you realize, oh, that's not actually the lesson that we already discussed in the previous thing. It's actually this other nuanced thing that's, very
Mm-hmm.
similar, but I want you to consider this viewpoint for a second and see if it changes your mind. And so the really great thing of having that deeper level context with the company, the deeper level context with the human that is the CEO, really superpowers those conversations to move through a lot of topics really fast.
Yes. Yes. So how do you think that's trusted advisor, in your experience, can help these CEOs with their culture and building engagement in their teams?
So that's one of the areas I love to play in the most. So I have depth in
Nice.
the HR realm. I have depth in internal communications, and so it all sort of comes together to be a lot about what is the culture of this organization. And so again, making sure that the CEO is having conversations in safe, judgment-free, productive spaces contributes to that because
Mm-hmm.
they're not harming the culture unwittingly because they are having conversations that don't belong in certain rooms or with certain people. And it's also knowing how to take, so if a CEO doesn't have a safe, judgment-free, productive place to work through stuff, then when they're in the room with somebody who's providing them something that is very negative stimulus for them, right? It's either angering them, it's annoying them,
Yeah.
it's something, it's causing a very big negative reaction. The only place the CEO might feel like they have to deal with that is directly in that room. And so the way they respond might be different than they know, you know what? I'm just going to listen and then I'm going to take this to Tobey and we're going to talk about this so that I can formulate a clear, calm, level-headed response later.
That's a great point, because knowing that they have that place where they can go talk about something that could be frustrating, could be something they need another opinion on, is a huge thing. And as you say that, I realize now that I've got several of my clients that happens once in a while. I'll get a call and they want to go through a frustrating situation
Yeah.
so that we can talk about, so that they get it clear and then they can go forward a different way.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's settling to know that, especially if you have like a weekly call
Mm-hmm.
scheduled with whoever your advisor is. So it's why it plays the line of coaching and advising. I see a clear distinction between those two. But when people talk about coaching, they talk about sort of this weekly, cadence oftentimes. But knowing when that is on your calendar provides a sense of calm because that's your place, and that you
Yeah.
have it coming up. So even those people who call you at random, they're living in a state of anxiety when they do that because they're like, I need to work through this with somebody. Who can I call? Who can I reach out to? Who's available? Who's the right person? And if you have those regular calls, and what can be really great is knowing when, um, creating a decision point of when you need to bring in somebody new.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a good advisor for internal workings of a company, right? How things are working together, processes, tools, resources, communications, all of that. But I'm not the right advisor for a go-to-market strategy. But for a lot of CEOs, strong enough to know, is this just a question you're working through? Or is this something you need expertise for? And if you don't have even one advisor around you, you don't have anybody to talk to about, like, is this just something that's normal? Is this just something that I have to deal with? Or is this a gap in my knowledge, circle,
Mm-hmm.
that I either need to fill with an advisor or somebody as an employee or something?
Yeah. That's a great point. So what are the things that you like the most about playing this role and helping the CEOs?
I really like the change in dynamic that I see. So a lot of times the clients that I'm working with, there's broken trust somewhere. And sometimes that's as simple as the CEO is doing the best they can with the information they have, and they're figuring it out as they go along. And it just doesn't always work, right? They don't always get it right. And so
Yeah.
there's sort of a broken trust of like, are you really the best leader for this organization or whatnot? And sometimes it's really deep. Somebody has done something really wrong at the organization and there's a actual breach of trust. Sometimes it's again, that dynamic of there's uh, yelling or arguments in conversations that's not really professional and that's not really the environment you should be creating. And so watching people sort of de-stress, and when they de-stress, and it's not just the CEO, but it includes them, And when they de-stress, they become more productive. They become more valuable for the team.
Mm-hmm.
We stop seeing them for all their faults, and we start realizing, oh, they actually do great work. And so just removing those barriers. Certainly there's people who have just had it and they can't recover from a situation where it's
Yeah.
just gone wrong for long enough. Those times when I can see the turnaround of an organization, I don't think there's anything better than that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is pretty amazing when you see the CEOs and the highest level leadership start to understand that they need to approach things differently. And once you see how that filters and how that works in the organization, it is pretty special.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So when you're in these situations, how do you think the trusted advisor can really help that CEO avert some like landmines and things like that? Because it is, I don't think a CEO goes a day without making a mistake. It's just they hope it's not the mistake that will be the one, right?
Yeah. I think again, it comes down to, I don't have to solve this problem right now. I have a space where we can think about it, or I'm going to have somebody that gives me a whole bunch of questions to challenge my thinking on this.
Yeah.
Right. And there's somebody who's going to sort of help me flush this out to the space where I actually feel good about making a decision instead of this high anxiety. Well, I guess I just have to make one right now. And so giving them that sort of calm, space to do that, that's helpful. I think for some CEOs, it's again, some of those landmines really are just about the emotionality of the situation. And
Yeah.
if you have a space where you can release valve the emotionality of the situation, not in a bomb, but in a diffusable situation that doesn't have any impacts on the internal people, then that saves a lot too.
Yes. Yes. I think it is good to be able to give them that's again a safe space to think through things more clearly before they make a judgment, rather than making a judgment with limited information or those questions being asked. Because oftentimes as a trusted advisor, I'm sure you're asking questions that the internal people aren't or would not.
Right. And a lot of times it's just simply it's sort of a devil's advocate play, right? Even if I know where you're headed or whatnot, it's let's reframe this. And if we reframe this, do you still want the decision you're thinking about? Do you still want to go that direction? Did you realize that by reframing it, there's actually a huge gap in the knowledge you have before you can make a decision? And so it's not intentionally trying to throw a wrench or be provocative with these people. I think there's an interesting line there. So it's not truly devil's advocate, but it's how do I get you to change your viewpoint on, not change it, but take a different viewpoint for a second and see whether you still go the path you were thinking originally.
That's huge. That's huge. So what has you excited for the remainder of 2025?
Well, it's interesting. So I've been doing this advising work for a while, and one of the clients that I was doing that for, I'm actually an internal resource now. So I'm doing COO work at that organization, and so that'll be really interesting. It's an organization that is intended to be high growth, highly ambitious in its designs and what it's doing, and so you know I hope that I can continue to pursue additional advising clients because I love that newness of all those
Yes.
different situations. But it is fun to sort of really stretch my muscle inside an organization too. And I haven't done that for a little while. So it's really interesting to see all the internal problems and do it from that side. And so if I can combine both of those at the same time, there's some really cool magic I think that happens for both the advising clients and the internal client that I have due to the fact that my brain is working on all of those problems at once.
Yes. Yes. The combination of working on several different types of challenges keeps it fresh.
Yeah. And deep in one way and then, broad in the other way. And that just keeps your brain awake and learning and adapting to all the current situations. So you don't have, I think one of the interesting things once people label themselves with the advisor tag is making sure that they stay relevant, right? Just because you can be an advisor doesn't mean you can always be an advisor, right? You can lose your relevancy if you're not keeping up with things. And so I don't think it requires you to be internal to keep up. I think there's a lot of different ways you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that there sometimes are advisors that forget that element and then might not be the best advisors anymore just because they aren't staying as relevant.
Yeah, in long-term advising, it's huge to be able to continue evolving what you're helping the CEO do to continue, so they're continuing to evolve in the
Yeah.
ways that they need to. Yeah.
It's too quick changing in almost every environment. I mean, even finances, like the finance tools that are available now are different than what they used to
Yeah.
be. The you know, all of the tools and resources available to help you, the way that you can use ChatGPT to cut through things,
Yeah.
and all of that. If you're not utilizing those tools and if your advisors aren't utilizing those tools, then you might be getting outdated advice.
That's true. That's true. So if you were a CEO today listening to this, how would you begin, thinking about and selecting a trusted advisor to help you along the way?
I think if you find that there's sort of this, I don't know what I don't know, and it's adding a level of energy burn to
Mm.
your world and your work, I think that is the space that I've cued into more, and not a woo version of energy, but literally it's so draining, right? If you find yourself drained at the end of every day and a week, there's probably something going on that you could use an advisor for.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that everybody I work with, it's light and easy and, life is fun. Sometimes it is, but it's really about finding yourself more often than not in that space of overwhelm or uncertainty or anxiety. If you find yourself that, I would definitely use that as a clue that
Mm-hmm.
maybe an advisor is a good solution for the problems that you're figuring out. I think then if you notice that there's a sense of unease or anxiety or stress or whatever, why? What is generating that for you? And that's going to give you a little bit of insight on what kind of advisor is out there.
Mm-hmm.
And therein lies one of the probably biggest challenges that I think exists now is so many people, it's a proliferated market really of coaches, advisors, um, different people that have these very similar sounding titles. And so knowing, okay, how do I differentiate from this ocean of people available to me? Who's going to be my best bet? I don't think there's an easy approach other than treat it a little bit like therapy. And I know a lot of the CEOs I work with probably haven't been to therapy, and that's fine. The idea is you try it out. And if it's helpful quickly, then you're probably headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
If it feels like it takes too long to get a good conversation flow, or you're not getting any insights from this person within
Yep.
about 3 sessions or so, if it didn't lighten you in some way, then you probably have the wrong advisor and just move on, quickly enough. Um, that's the interesting thing about trying to figure out what contracts make most sense of this, right? Is understanding that, especially in the advising world, it is about fit, right? And it's about
Yes.
personality fit. It's about experience fit. It's about, the communication mode fit. There's so
Mm-hmm.
many different ways that it really has to be a symbiotic relationship, as far as what's working for both people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great advice. So, Toby, if someone wants to get a hold of you, talk to you about being a trusted advisor, talking about the process, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So certainly people are welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. That's the nice thing. Tobey Wyatt, there's not many of me out there. So TOBEYWYATT, searching that in LinkedIn gets you to me. And so a direct message there, I'm usually pretty attentive to that. And my website is under construction at the moment.
All
So
right.
that's not super helpful, but it is motherlode.biz. And therefore my email is connected to that. It's toby@motherlode.biz.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Toby, it was great having you today talking about the quantifiable impact of a CEO's trusted advisor. thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Damon. Loved it.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Well, I want to thank everybody that was listening out there today. I can see that we had some listeners, and thank you for being with us. If you got in this a little bit late, you want to go back to the beginning and listen to Tobey from the beginning, because she dropped a lot of golden nuggets in here. And as she said, you can reach out to her on LinkedIn, Tobey Wyatt, Tobey Wyatt, and find her and talk to her a little bit more about this. Tobey, we're going to finish for now. I'm going to be back again next week. We're going to finish up offline.
Sounds great.